Evening, we are live. Hello, how are you? Thank you so much for joining me again this evening. I tell you what, every time I go live, just a couple of seconds beforehand, my tummy does kind of like all sorts of flips. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that with you because even though I've been doing this, a relatively long time, I still get nervous. I just wanted to share that with you. But I know that I am in the comfort of all of you with your warm welcome and your warm arms, etc. So let's get on with this because my guest has already sent me a request to join us. I love promptness. I'll wait for her to arrive and then I shall introduce you. But hello, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I've just dropped my whole phone. Great start. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. So, yes, this week I'm chatting with someone I've developed and I'm going to be honest here, right? I've developed a bit of a fangirl crush on you, Imriel. I'm putting it out there. I'm owning it.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
Welcome. Well, Imriel, for those of you who don't know, and why don't you? She's the founder and CEO of Content is Queen, which is the UK's first and only women's podcast festival. She's also an award-winning podcast host of Wannabe podcast. She has interviewed some massive names, including Ibrahim X. Kendi, and we've been talking how to be an anti-racist. If you haven't read his book, again, why not? Estelle, Jamila Jamil, and loads more change makers as well. And you are a master, a queen in the audio world. So welcome.
Thank you. That's such a great introduction. I don't think I could have ever have done myself that much justice. So I thank you, Ruby.
I've just mentioned your success in the podcasting world. We're getting straight into it, by the way, Imriel. Including creating the UK's first and only women's podcast festival. Tell us, what is it about podcasting that lights you up so much?
What isn't there to love about podcasting? I think for me, it's about the intimacy of the medium. It is truly a place where you are stripped of everything but your voice and your story. There's no visuals, there's no kind of judgment of this person looks like someone I can't trust, or I don't like what they're wearing, or I don't like the way their eyes move. Like all of that is gone in audio, and you're just there and all you can do is listen. And I think listening is literally the path to empathy and how we're going to create better societies when we just listen to each other and remove all of the kind of biases, conscious and unconscious biases that we have. I think that's what I love about it. It's the intimacy of how close you can feel to one another and how close you can feel to a host and a storyteller, but also just how a single story can completely just change your entire perspective. It's the best medium, bar none.
Wow. What an epic sort of like pitch for podcasting. That is insane. And who doesn't love podcasts? I feel as though they've been around for ages, right? But they are just entering this glorious, I want to say like golden era of content. There is so much stuff out there, and you'll be at the forefront, the vanguard of uncovering like fantastic talent as well. That must give you a massive kind of like joy and a spring in your step when you get up in the morning, right?
It does, I actually really, really like working with creators. It's been a part of my journey into podcasting. Like from the very beginning, we were always working with other people. We were always trying to bring people into it. We were trying to get people to understand why podcasting is important, how it's like a great way to kind of not only build your own authority, but tell your own stories and own your own narratives. So I don't know if it gives me a spring in my step as much as it's a lot of hard work. I can't lie. It's a big job. It's a lot of hard work. very few people care enough to do that kind of work. But I think that's true across the board, across industries. It's like you have to really care about it to keep trying to bring people up into these spaces, and it's often the people that are from these marginalized backgrounds, like myself. I'm Black and a woman. That yeah, it's kind of the responsibility or the burden seems to fall on our shoulders a little bit, and so it's a heavy burden, but I do enjoy it, and I can't see myself doing anything else, to be
honest. We thank you for doing that, and as you phrased it, carrying that burden, but along the way you're like pushing down barriers, and you're cracking stones and stuff, and you're just paving the way for all this wonderful talent to come in behind you, which is what a true change maker and somebody who we talk about, like role modeling, etc., should be about, right? We talked about this last week with my guest Ola Pello, and we talked about making space, because there is sufficient space for all creators to exist in, shoulder to shoulder.
I agree 100%. There's so much space, and I've started, because as you were saying, like podcasting is going through this moment and people are thinking, oh gosh, everyone's got a podcast now, there's no point in me creating. I'm like, this industry is so brand new. It's like there are genuinely like probably I think the number was around 750,000 like active podcasts compared to like 2 million that's in the big register, the database, or the RSS feeds that exist.
Right. And 1 billion people on Facebook. I mean, let's look at that relatively, right?
Exactly. And it's just like, well, there's actually tons and tons of room, tons of opportunities. And actually the thing about podcasting and the thing about like this medium is that you are creating your own community. Like no one can tell the story that you've got to tell. No one can kind of have the interests the way you have that interest. And it's such a personal thing as well. Like some people may love your industry or love your topic, but may not like the person that's leading its voice or their style. And so there's always room for a different style, a different voice, a different technique. There's loads of rooms for you to have your own community and your own audience. That doesn't necessarily have to be a monetizing thing. It could just be that, you share your passions and your interests. So yeah, there's tons and tons and tons of rooms, and podcasting is definitely like full of opportunities, and I'd love to encourage people to really get into it, because at least try it. It's just fun to try.
Man, you're really sending it to me. I really want one now. I want to ask you, a guest of yours, Naomi Shimada, who's a model and an author, she talked about the art of mastering your voice, which we just touched on. Now we know in social, talked about it, right? The 1 billion users on Facebook, it is like noisy. And sometimes it's easy to lose yourself within that noise and end up adapting your voice to, to something that you think you ought to be, or aligning it with someone else whose views you think are on trend, but really in your gut, that they just don't sit right with you. I would love to know, how would you describe your voice? Have you always found it as easy and natural to sit in? Because when I was doing my research, it just felt like you were just born to do this.
I actually feel like I haven't found it, so that's like really nice of you to say. I'm sure people think I have a very distinct voice, and I'm not just talking about the way it sounds, obviously, and that's what you're talking about, like the values and the things I choose to talk about and how I choose to kind of use my voice to tell certain stories. I think I kind of just do what instinctively feels good. I will be honest and say that I definitely feel like I lost it after a really bad social media experience. And so I don't feel as brave or as open as I once was. I was definitely like a braver, more outspoken, slightly more political person, kind of in a former podcasting life. And yeah, just having had a social media pile, it was a really negative experience. It really just kind of put me in my shell, and I really went dark on social media for a while. So I think, yes, to an extent, it's probably always come naturally to me to feel confident in my views, my values, and my ideas, and what I think is going to make the world a better place. But it hasn't always felt easy to express that all of the times. I've definitely, as you mentioned, like I've had to go and knock on doors and kind of like be the first in the room and be the person that has to kind of like fly the flag for diversity and inclusion in these meetings and with these big, where yes, they may see the value, or at least on the surface they see the value, but can't put their hands in their pockets or can't dedicate the time or the resource needed. So it's really, really challenging, and sometimes you kind of get a little bit in, and it's really dangerous actually sometimes to be that person, because you clearly get the meeting because of your voice. You get in the room, but then you can be quickly silent or feel those. It can be stifling because they are giving you an opportunity, so you can't speak about things that are less than great or probably do need to be called out and challenged. So it is a really, really fine balance, and I do think sometimes I really struggle with it, to be perfectly honest. It doesn't always flow freely.
Well, it certainly sounds on your podcast that it flows freely, but I can appreciate that. And I mean, this is the whole other like show, isn't it? That whole, you get your foot through the door, you're at the table, and yeah, there's this feeling of like obligation, right? You're like that fine line you were talking about. It's I'm here, but how far do I want to push it before I get booted back out of the door? And I'm here because I'm carrying this huge, burden, or not, but I'm carrying this huge responsibility that I want to take, and I want to be able to change for others who are following me. So there is that fine balance. And I want to ask you about your voice, I suppose, that your former voice, you referred to it as. Do you feel as though there is either a podcast space, or that there will be a moment through digital marketing where you may see yourself, in your own views, being brave enough to step forward into that space that you've sidelined for the time being?
It's a really good question. It's something I've been grappling with, certainly for the last year and a half, where I've really had to kind of take up more space, especially with Content is Queen growing and developing. And I think there is a space where it becomes obvious that I will have no choice. Like, I feel like I'll be called upon to speak and be open and be honest, and that might not be the most pleasing thing for a lot of people to hear, specifically within the industry, because the industry is going to do what all industries do, and right now it's really hot to be diverse and inclusive, but after a while we know these things tend to kind of have their moments, and then
we see it still today, right? All those people who posted that black square.
Where are they?
Where's the support now?
So yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a time where I'm going to have to be outspoken and have to really advocate, not only for myself, but for the community that I serve, for the groups that I represent. But I think that's going to be a slightly different voice and a more evolved voice. And there's a level of maturity and growth that I've gone through this happened in 2016. It's been like about 5 years. So there's a lot of time that has passed, which for me feels like actually my voice has developed and evolved, and it's braver in other ways. I don't get as nervous or scared as I used to be about certain things, but it has meant that, maybe the world doesn't need to know all of my political leanings and all of my opinions, and I think it's just a growth thing, and I actually think that's probably a natural evolution of just being in the social media space and grow and basically learning with social media.
I wanted to ask you about evolution. Now that we've touched on it, it's really, you didn't start in the world, or intend to start in the world of podcasting. That evolved through your digital marketing background. A lot of people will come across evolution as business owners and often resist that because of what they perceive to lie ahead in terms of those the barriers and things that are scary, and coming up against people who don't want to hear what you have to say, etc. They resist that and they end up failing in some ways. But I want to know, how did you know it was right for you to pursue evolution in order to secure the success that we see today?
So again, wonderful question. Did I know? I think I did know. I think we were covering a lot of ground with the work I was doing in podcasting specifically. We were covering a lot of ground in a very, very short period of time, and we were entering spaces that I could never have envisaged entering. I was sitting at tables with people I would never have imagined I'd be sitting at tables with. And I think it's that kind of Trojan horse thing, right? Like you can either like try and burn the whole thing and create anarchy to recreate a system, or you can kind of change it from within. I'm a bit of, but I sit in both spaces. Sometimes I'm like, screw all of this, let's be crazy. The ground, and that definitely was probably more true of the voice I had before. Like, screw all of this, like let's call it out, let's just cancel. I guess I would have been a part of that cancel culture. But as you grow and as you get through these spaces, and it's not to say that you should allow the silencing, I think it's just knowing when to shut up, listen and observe, and take that information and take those learnings and use that for your advantage later on, or use it as leverage. So you have to play these things quite smart. And I think, yeah, it's hard. It's very...
Of course, it is always hard. I was just really interested. Thank you for sharing that. And I think what I was picking up there is that level of maturity as well. So you've still got that fire, right, inside of you. That fire can ignite in an array of spaces.
Yeah, you just have to be clever with it. It really is a case of just like knowing your moments, knowing who you can call out and when to call them out and how to do that. And I think that's the difference, is like knowing how and when, because it's not every day call out people on social media or call out brands and companies. Sometimes the influence and the change happens by going inside and collaborating and working with them and showing them what to do. And I think that's definitely been true of my career. Is like because I've been able to access them, I can just say, like, honestly, people think that companies just know what to do or might have like some inclination or should know better. They don't know better. Like it's not anyone's fault. They just genuinely do not have the information. And sometimes it's as simple as like, guys, this is not hard. This is how we do this. And it's like mind-blowing. Like, maybe if you want to reach this demographic of people, maybe you should just include them in the content making. Wow. Just like really simple, like the simplest what feels like sense isn't common sense. So I think, it's just knowing how to use your voice, when to use it, and being really strategic and being diplomatic. And that's what carries you in your career, and what people see as success today is like, it's just diplomacy and just knowing that I don't need to call you out publicly, because like I feel like I can email a lot of these people and say, this was problematic.
Again, it's those different levels of engagement, right? Those different levels of change that you're promoting. I want to know. I mean, you talked about the experience that you had, the negative experience on social media, and the evolution that you've gone through, and I suppose barriers that you faced as well. I want to know, how do you protect yourself and your creativity and your health to prevent burnout, while at the same time seeing almost that carrot dangled in front of you, which represents this potential change or payoffs in other forms, monetary or otherwise?
I don't, is the answer. That's the honest to God truth. I do not prioritize my health. I do not practice self-care enough. Which is a crying shame, because it's a big part of the podcast. And actually, I learned so much from the guests on the podcast, because so many of them have gone through this kind of work hard until you burn out phase. And like, my favorite interview on the podcast is Elaine Welteroth, and she talks about that. Like, she was the youngest editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue. Like, she worked hard, and you'd have to get to that position so young, and to a Black woman to do that. So, like, I work hard. I can't downplay it. I used to downplay it, and I used to minimize it a lot, but actually the honest to God truth, I work really, really hard. I'm working this evening. I was working yesterday evening. I work on the weekends. Like, I work really hard. Not to glamorize it, and it's not to say that's the way people should do it. I would love to take more breaks, but my brain does not switch off. And actually, one of the interviews I had with Charlie Craggs, the amazing trans activist everyone should follow and check out, we were talking about this, like, coming from working class backgrounds and like lower income backgrounds in particular. Like, there's like an inbuilt scarcity built into your mindset, because you're always going without and having to make sacrifices, or your family's having to make sacrifices. And it's like now I just have like a general, like, anxiety is my default setting. Like that, it's, I don't again, I'm laughing because I'm just so used to it now, but anxiety is like my baseline, and I have to think about, like, I can't imagine a life without that being there, because I've never known a life without it, and I've never known a life kind of without, and I would love to evolve and grow beyond that, and I think I will, and I'm definitely going through the therapy and doing the work to do that. But also, because that's how I'm wired, I have to just treat it as a superpower too. Like, my brain doesn't switch off. Okay, so how can I channel that and be productive with it? How can I actually use this so I'm not kind of like fizzling and flailing? And before, I would say now I'm much better at managing my time, managing rest. I'm still working hard. I'm still overworking. I'm still always exhausting.
It's an evolution, Imriel.
Yeah, it is. But before, I was burning out. Like, the year I did my MBA, I burnt out 4 times and ran 2 festivals back to back. That was a disaster. That year was awful. So
but you learn from that. It's happening again.
Yeah, it's not, I don't burn out in the same ways at all, but the level of stress and anxiety that I experience hasn't changed. I've just learned how to manage it better, and to find the moments where it's actually getting to that kind of boiling point. I know now, like, step back.
Yeah. Just turning down that heat. Thank you for being honest, Imriel. Respect that, and saying, you know, in everything you've just said. And I think a lot of viewers will relate to that, especially those who are running their own companies, right? We're often very creative, very ambitious, and that's nothing to apologize for, right? That's not what we're here for. But we all have to go through that period of evolution in terms of, well, where do we start? We need to start somewhere. If that's time management, great. If that's recognizing boiling point and then turning down the heat, great too. But it's the start of that, those small steps that eventually will be, you know, get to bigger sort of like opportunities for you to be able to have that downtime for you in the fashion that you need it in order to continue fueling your creativity. So I thank you for that. Right, we have run out of time. Oh my day, 20 minutes just
that went
by. I still have so many wonderful questions that I want to ask you, but we're out of time. Maybe we need a part 2. I want to say thank you so much for sharing from your heart. It really did feel like that today. And where can my lovely, lovely community members find you and listen to your podcast and consume your, you know, like change-making content?
Yeah, so Wanna Be the podcast is available wherever you get podcasts from. Spotify, Apple, Castbox, Pocket Cast, all the good stuff. Wherever you get podcasts, it's Wanna Be, like the Spice Girls song, but 2 words. And again, like, some really great interviews, as Ruby has alluded to. I've interviewed really high profile people, but honestly, everyone is special and amazing, and has such beautiful insights to share about how they got to where they are. And so go listen to that. And my favorite episode is Elaine Welsh Roth. If you want to start somewhere, that one is a great one based on what I've talked about today. I am of course on social media. I'm probably more active personally on my Twitter, which is at Immy Morgan, but do check out Content is Queen HQ, which is where I'm live from today, because that is where all of my time, energy and life source goes into.
I will say, if anybody's interested in like the podcasting world, and why wouldn't you be after that amazing sales pitch? But it came from passion. It was a passion pitch from Imriel at the start. Definitely check out Imriel's website, because there is a section there called Pay It Forward. And Imriel, you do a 25-minute kind of like Q&A video. I don't know how you have done it, but you have like jammed years of experience into those 25 minutes. It was insane watching it. I would absolutely encourage anyone who's watching to head to Imriel's website and check it out. It's under the Pay It Forward. But I've got to stop. No, but thank you so much, Imriel, for joining me this evening. And don't work too late.
But we'll see.
Keeping it real. Bye-bye.